Hey students, welcome to week 3 of our 1A class. So we are a quarter of the way done, moving closer to our halfway point. So stay strong. I know it feels like a lot of work, but remember that it's 8 weeks of what usually is an 18-week course. So it's gonna start to feel pretty heavy, but just keep telling yourself you're almost there. I do want to commend you on the peer reviews. I know a lot of you were really nervous about those, or you tried your best to give advice. And I think for the most part, you guys did a pretty good job. So remember, I don't expect you to know all of the answers when you're peer reviewing each other. I don't expect you to have like the magical solution for everybody. I just expect you to be honest and to be helpful. And sometimes that's as simple as saying, I really like this thing, but I was confused at this part, or I like the way you said this, but maybe this person that you were describing didn't come across so clear. So those simple suggestions can be incredibly helpful when you go to revise. As far as your remembering an event essays, I will start grading those just very, very shortly, but I'll probably only be able to get through a couple a day, so be patient with me. I'm hoping to have all of them done in a week, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. So if you do have any questions about your grade, I know sometimes I am only a human being, and I might have maybe miscounted a forum or something like that, or misput in a grade, or just make sure you are emailing me and letting me know. So as for this week, we are going to get started on the second essay, which is called Arguing a Position. And this is really the cornerstone to the 1A experience. So really learning how to construct an argument, how to incorporate research, and how to drive your point home. Okay, so let's begin with arguing a position. Oops. So the first part of this is selecting an issue, and you really want to choose a well-focused, presented, focused issue. And what that means here is that the topic has to be controversial, right? It's very easy to fall into that category of choosing a topic that isn't worth arguing about. I've had students try to make an argument about child abuse before, and very rarely is that considered a controversial topic. A lot of people would agree that that is actually a bad thing. So make sure you choose something that's controversial. You must take a clear position on the issue. So if you choose an issue that you sort of feel on the fence about, or you have conflicted views about, I am asking you in this paper to take one side. So please make sure that, again, that you choose a topic appropriately, and that you take a clear stance on how you feel about that topic. And although it's not possible to prove that a position on a controversial topic is right or wrong, it is possible to present a reasonable argument that will successfully convince your audience to accept your position. And that's exactly what you're after here. You want your audience, so that's your peers and your professor, right, to accept that your position is the better one. The assignment itself, once you have selected a controversial topic, I want you to do some preliminary reading about that topic. How much do you already know about that topic? How much do you have to learn? Is it something that you feel you can be passionate about, especially working on that particular topic over several weeks at a time? You want to be able to not lose steam with it, which is why in 1A you get to select your own topic. I want you to also decide if you can write appropriately about that topic for 4 to 5 pages. So if the topic seems so big that you would need 10 pages to write about that, then you might want to hold off until your big paper at the end of the semester. If it feels like you couldn't write a whole heck of a lot about that thing, then you probably want to, again, choose another topic. So think about those things as you're kind of doing this investigative work. Also, you need to consider whether or not you can find credible sources, and you'll need at least 4 of them. So please be sure that you are considering what a credible source is, where you can find that information. Can you read all the information out there on that And then can you actually incorporate that into your own work? The second thing to consider once you have selected your topic is what is your stance, right? So what is going to be your thesis around this whole thing? This is the pillar of the argument essay. So what is the main point? So you have to consider not only what is the topic, now what is your claim? And the way that I like to break down the thesis for the argument paper is that there's two parts to this. You have your topic, which is your subject, and then the claim. So what is your argument? And that's what makes a thesis. It's typically one sentence, sometimes two, depending on how complicated it is. And sometimes, depending on how you construct a thesis, it might actually have your supporting reasons listed in the thesis, which is fine. It doesn't necessarily have to do that. If you want some more information on just how argument theses might look, a chapter you're going to be reading next week talks more about that in depth. So it's chapter 19, but something that I just want you to consider right now, because you're going to kind of have to pull together a working thesis this week as you start to dive into research. So what I usually do when I'm trying to construct an argument is I spend a good amount of time just brainstorming ways to actually say something. What is my main point? What is the thesis? So try to work on that as best you can. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is the position itself. So a well-supported position. So think of this as your body paragraphs. So you're going to have many body paragraphs, and everybody's essay in this particular case is going to be different. Some of you might have 5 or 6 body paragraphs, some of you might have 4 body paragraphs, but every single body paragraph is going to offer one supporting reason that's going to back up your thesis. Every reason is going to have evidence that's going to support that. And the evidence is what you are going to research to support each reason. So it's really scaffolded here. Okay, so, and I want to show you this a little bit more broken down. This is not necessarily how your essay is going to look, but this is just kind of a rough draft of what one might look at. So in each case here, this might be a paragraph. So in this particular instance, there might be 6 paragraphs, right? So notice here, right, we have an introduction. We want to make sure we introduce the topic. We might have to start this with statistics or a shocking instance, right? We'll frame the issue, so what's the problem, right? And then we'll come up with our clear stated thesis at the end of that introduction. In body paragraph 1, we're going to offer a reason, a specific reason that's going to support that thesis. We're also then going to present some evidence to show this reason, and we're going to make sure that we've directly connected the reason and the evidence back to the thesis. So here's where I'm trying to point out that that's scaffolded. And if you'll notice, for body paragraph 2, it's exactly the same kind of structure, but it's a different reason. Same thing with body paragraph 3. It's a different reason the body paragraphs 1 and 2. Now you could keep duplicating that, right, for as many body paragraphs as you need. So again, some students might have 4 body paragraphs, some might have 5. When you start to get, into classes where you're required to write, 20-page papers, you might have, 10 body paragraphs. But every body paragraph is just going to be a little bit different, right? Notice here, I've also added in a counter-argument paragraph. We'll get to that in just a minute. But just briefly, counter-argument is going to acknowledge an opposition's argument. So at some point in this paper, you have to acknowledge that there's another side, and here's an argument that they often make. You're going to state why that opposition is wrong, and you're going to present evidence to counter, that's why it's called a counter-argument, to counter that opposition. You never, never, never stray away from your thesis. You still continue to support your thesis and your counter-argument. And notice lastly here, conclusion paragraph, you're still going to have a conclusion. You might make a summary, a brief summary of the argument. I would definitely probably offer a reassertion of your thesis just to kind of tie it all back together, and then maybe offer a solution or a call to action for the reader. So what should they do now that they know about your argument? So jumping back into counter-argument, so Counter-argument simply just means that we are going to respond to an opposing viewpoint. So every good argument must acknowledge that the other side exists. If you don't, it's like arguing in a vacuum. It's like arguing with people who already agree with you. You also don't seem quite as informed as a reader, as a writer, if you don't acknowledge that there is another side. So the counter-argument should be one full body paragraph that's going to address this opposing viewpoint. So, and in this, you're going to explicitly state why that opposing side is wrong. So in Jessica Stansky's essay, Children Need to Play, Not Compete, I've just broken down here the thesis and then the supporting reason for each body paragraph. Notice that her thesis says that when overzealous parents and coaches impose adult standards on children's sports, the result can be activities that are neither satisfying nor beneficial to children. So she's basically saying that sports aren't a lot of fun when parents and coaches impose those adult standards on kids, right? In her first reason, her first body paragraph, she says that physical actions can be bad for growing bodies. And she spends a lot of time actually talking about that and providing research for that. Her second reason is that she says the fear of getting hurt can actually detract from the enjoyment for kids. So this is also a reason why we shouldn't impose adult standards on kids' sports. Her third reason is the psychological dangers of that. And then the fourth reason, she actually ties in her counter-argument right here. So the counter-argument says winning and losing may be an inevitable part of adult life, but they should not be part of childhood. So essentially she's addressing that opposing viewpoint of someone who would say, hey, kids are going to have to grow up and learn to win and learn to lose. Why shouldn't they learn that now as a kid? And she's saying that might be true, however, it shouldn't be a part of childhood. Just because it is a part of adulthood doesn't mean it has to be a part of childhood. So that's the counter argument she's trying to make. Notice the placement too. That counter argument paragraph comes after she's talking about psychological dangers, so it's directly related to that. And then she jumps back into some more supporting reasons. And I think she offers maybe 2 or 3 more before she gets to the conclusion. So organization, it's really important that you come up with an organization that will build in some fashion. So if you are not considering how your essay is going to work and what order you're going to put those supporting reasons in, you're not really doing yourself justice here. So it is up to you to direct the reader how to follow your logic. You want to provide cues, transitions, and clear topic sentences. I think those topic sentences are super important. So again, one of my particular strategies when I'm trying to write an argument paper is once I've come up with that working thesis, I go ahead and write all the topic sentences for all my body paragraphs and my counter argument. Just doing that little bit of an outline forces me to make sure that I'm staying on track and making sure that everything is related back to that thesis. So plus it allows me to then go ahead and decide which one should go where, right? So think about that structure. You'll notice here in step 3, I've given you 2 different ways to structure this. You can do most to least convincing or least to most. A lot of students like to go least to most because then they feel like their strongest supporting reason happens before the conclusion. I think that's a fine way to do it. Sometimes students like to really come out strong with their essays, so then they go most to least. So whichever one you feel like fits your essay best, you have the choice. I've certainly seen it structured a little bit differently too, but those are just 2 major ways that it's done in argument essay. And then lastly, I want you to make sure that you consider where that counter argument does fit in. Again, I would put it in when it's directly related to the topic, the body paragraph sort of before it. That's what I would do. In a lot of cases, that could be, after the first body paragraphs. I've seen it happen after the second one, after the third one. So again, you have to think about that organization, and it has to make a lot of sense for your reader. Lastly here, I just want to give some cautionary things with arguing a position. The most key thing here is topic selection. So you really want to make sure that you are staying away from things that can get you into logical trouble. So what I mean by that is sometimes religious or moral based arguments don't work out well. Particularly, right, if you're trying to make an argument that your religion is perhaps better, or if, maybe there's a moral based decision. And if your audience doesn't subscribe to the same morals and or same religion, right, you've already kind of lost that argument. So make sure that you're selecting a topic that will be appropriate. Second thing, and I think, again, it is really critical to longevity and success with this paper, is passion. So choose something that you actually care about. So I know I have a lot of nurses in this class. If you deeply care about the field, medical field, right? Think about maybe writing a paper that's in service to that. I've had some really great essays that have done arguing about, health, medical health, the medical system, the healthcare system. I've had papers on triage theory, right? So maybe pick something that you really do care about. Make sure that it's current research, right? Something that is maybe newer. You don't want research that's older than 5 years. This world is constantly changing. There's constantly new information and research and data, and you don't want to dive into a topic that's old or has been argued about for decades, unless there's, again, something sort of new about that. Make sure it's assignment appropriate. So I will make sure I put up all the assignment qualifications up on the Moodle website, so make sure you check that out and kind of run down the list of that to make sure that what you have chosen to do is going to fit the parameters of that. So that's arguing a position. I'm going to just put this on pause real quick and pull up the next thing, which is MLA. So hold tight 1 second. So MLA is the next thing we're going to be talking about. You're going to read 2 different chapters this week about MLA. And I do want to make mention here, particularly in chapter, I think it's 26. Let me look at my book really quickly, 27. I want you to know how to cite using your book, but a lot of times the library's databases that you're going to be using will automatically cite it for you. So as long as you know and are aware that you are still responsible for getting that citation right. Again, so I just want you to know how to use your book as a resource, not necessarily memorize all that stuff in there. So MLA, let's jump into it. So MLA format, there are 3 components to this that you need to know. 1 is works cited page, 2 is in-text citation, and the last part of that is the plagiarism part. So when it comes to your outside sources, anything that you consult during the course of this essay is considered an outside source. So you have to list all of these sources on your works cited page. So works cited page, you can see right here, I just have a little sample page right here in the center, is its own page. It's the very last page. So if your essay is 4 pages long, right, you can see here the student, they still have their last name and then page 5, right? It starts a whole new page. Notice here works cited is centered, not bold, no underline, no quotation marks. Also notice the spacing too. It's double spaced still. I noticed a couple people who turned in their remembering event essay and they didn't either double space, so they single spaced, or in one case a student quadruple spaced, right? So those are not MLA format. MLA format is always going to be double spaced with no extra sort of spacing happen. Also notice just the formatting here, right? Each citation is the one that's touching the margins. So it's listed alphabetically by last name, right? If we didn't have a last name, then we would list it by the name of the article. So again, your book is going to drop into all of the information that you'll need to know for each citation. Typically, it's who wrote it, what is it, right? Where does that belong in, right? What book does that belong to? If there's an editor, we include that. where was it published, who published it, when was it published, what pages can I find it on, and what kind of medium is it. So I can see right here this says print, which means it's a book, right? If it didn't say that, if it said, web, then I would know that that's a source I would find on a website, obviously. MLA is a real association, Modern Language Association. There is a group of people who get together every year, and they decide on the things that we should do for the humanities and how we're going to document sources and what kind of format we're going to have. So again, when I mention MLA format, right, I'm talking about this, right, formatting your papers, 1-inch margins all the way around, right, 12-point font, right, Times New Roman. You're going to double space everything. Make sure that your header is on the first page on the left side. So that's your name, my name, whatever course it is. In this case it says English 575, but in our case it'd be English 1A. And then the date in the international date format. All right, so standardized quoting sources. For MLA, there's only one way of quoting sources within your own words. So in-text citation means that during your essay, your words and thoughts, you will use an outside source, an expert, to support your ideas. So during the course of your words and thoughts, you are going to supplement that with somebody else's work. So it's really important that you make the distinction between somebody else talking and your work, okay? So again, anytime you use an outside source, you have to give that person credit. Even if you don't use a direct word-for-word quote, you still have to give them credit if their work informed your opinion, okay? A parenthetical citation simply means that after we quote, right, we're going to put some keyword information in that parentheses. Usually what appears in that parentheses is the last name of the author or authors and the page number where that information was found on. What that tells me is I use that like a keyword, right? And I flip over to your works cited page and I look to find that last name, right? Once I find that last name on the works cited page, then I can go ahead and look up that citation, look at the page number that you reference, and that's how I'm going to find that information. So plagiarism, I do want to take a minute to talk about this. So anytime you use anybody else's words and you do not properly cite them, you are stealing. This is a violation of academic integrity, and it's a very, very serious form of cheating in college. So in order to avoid this, you are going to make sure that you properly quote and properly attribute your sources, okay? So you're going to give credit to the original author. Even if you summarize an outside source, right? Even if you take a paraphrase, right? Or excuse me, you paraphrase somebody's work. You like their idea, but you just change a few words into your own words, you still have to give that person credit. A lot of times I notice students who end up getting caught for plagiarism do one of two things. There's the student who is super lazy and thinks that I'm not going to catch them, and they always get caught. And then there's the student who just doesn't maybe think about it or isn't really sure how to do it, and they also end up getting caught. And I will tell you all, I catch students every single semester, and it can be very disheartening for me. I do read everything you guys submit to me. I do take my job incredibly seriously. Not only that, but I use Turnitin to help me find that stuff. So please, 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 if you feel like you aren't sure how to cite something, make sure you send me an email, right? We can always chat. We can certainly do a phone call, anything like that. The Language Success Center is there to help you as well. So I don't want you to feel like you have to go at this alone and know all the answers to that, okay? So again, just sort of driving all of this home, if you copy another writer's sentence word for word without giving credit, right, you are plagiarizing. Okay. If you forget quotation marks, just a simple like omission like that can also be considered plagiarism. Despite your intent, right? it's still it's indirect or direct plagiarism, right? So again, I'm just trying to make sure that you understand, right? Just because you forget something doesn't mean that it doesn't then count against you. So quotations show us when you are directly quoting someone else. So these are their actual words, word for word. So it is showing where your voice sort of stopped and somebody else's voice started. Hopefully, an expert in that case, right? So even if you take someone else's words and put them into your own words, as I mentioned before, like paraphrasing or summarizing, this is still considered plagiarism. So always, always, always identify your sources. I'd way rather you tell me too many times that this work belongs to somebody else than for you to try to pass it off as your own, okay? So again, the Works Cited is just a list of all the sources that you consulted at the end of your essay. It's its own page. It's listed in alphabetical order with all the information so that the reader can find where you got your sources. If you want to know if I actually check all of the sources that you list, the answer is yes. So make sure that you cite those properly on the Works Cited page. Each source must be listed in a particular way. So depending on if it's a book, if it's an article, again, your book, the St. Martin's Guide, is going to help you with that and help you understand that. A lot of databases, again, go ahead and do that for you. You just simply have to click on those citation tools, and I'll show you an example of that in just a minute. All right. So here's just some examples, right? Notice here there's books with one author, books with two authors, articles in a periodical. Internet sources are different just depending if you use an interview, if you use a documentary, which you're welcome to use, right? Any of those things have to be cited in a particular way, so make sure that you do consult your book. Another great resource to use too when you're trying to find how to do the Works Cited is the OWL Purdue page. All right. So in-text citation just means within your own words, you are inserting somebody else's words and or research, summary of their work, something like that. So you actually have to sort of stop and give credit to where that information came from. So one acronym that I like to use in some of my other classes to help students remember everything that needs to go in an in-text citation is ICE. Fun acronym time, right? But I just stands for introduce. So it's really helpful sometimes to have that signal phrase, right? Where you introduce your expert prior to quoting their words. This can help you qualify who is talking, right? If you have a, famous research scientist and you are quoting them, that looks better for your argument. It looks like not only did you do really great research in helping you find the answers, but you aren't going to go out there in the world and do that kind of research yourself yet. So it just looks like you are well read on this particular topic and your credibility goes up. C means citation. So once you have quoted their words, right, if you've used a direct quote, right, obviously you would use quotation mark. If it's not a direct quote, you wouldn't have to use quotation marks, but you still have to cite that. So again, that means that parenthetical citation. So last name, page number, right? If the last name isn't available, you tell us where that particular information came from, and the page number. If the page number isn't available, obviously you can't put that. Then you put the end punctuation. So I'll show you that example in a second. Last thing I want to mention here is this E, which is probably the most important part of using an outside source, is to never leave your quote hanging. So you always, always, always have to connect your outside sources to your larger ideas. I see students do this every single semester where they end paragraphs with a quote. And that's not helpful to a reader because we have no idea how to synthesize that information. It's your job as the writer to take outside research and to tell us how it's relevant to your topic. So with a quote, here's just a basic anatomy of a quote. And so you'll see that signal phrase right at the beginning of that sentence where we introduce the speaker, right? So according to Sarah Mendoza, then we offer her qualifications. So her credentials are she's a professor at biology at Stanford. And then we actually give the direct word for word quote. Notice at the very end of this particular quote, we don't end this with a period, right? What we are allowed to do in this particular case is move the end punctuation here. We need to go ahead and give the page number within parentheses. And so once I run into this particular quote, if I was grading your essay, right, what I would be looking for on your works cited page, right, is Mendoza, Sarah, right, the name of the article, maybe the book where it came out of, right, and then I'm going to look up that information. I'm going to flip over to page 10 and see if I can see that that information came from there. All right. Here's an example. I'm just going to skip over that really quickly. So I've given the signal phrase here. I've given the quote. And then in this particular case, right, Mitch Albom is the author. The signal phrase here, this comes from the person in the book. So that quote is attributed to Morrie Schwartz, although Mitch Albom wrote the book. So that's why his name is here. And here's the page number comes where that quote comes from. I've also given 2 sentences to kind of explain the relevancy of that quote. All right. So make sure when you do use outside sources that the readers always know who is talking. If you are going to use direct quotes with quotation marks, make sure you quote that source exactly. One cautionary tale I do want to mention is not to fill up your paper with quotes. Your essay should mostly be you talking. I like to use the 80-20 rule. So 80% of that paper is you talking. Only about 20% of it is other experts talking in there. So you should only be using a quote if it's striking as well. If the author has said it in such a striking way, or it's said in such a way that you couldn't say it any better, that's when you should use a direct quote. If you find that you could actually say it in a more clear way, especially if you're dealing with researchers who sometimes can use a difficult jargon, then you should actually paraphrase it or summarize it. Okay? Again, you still have to give credit for that particular source, but you certainly have the power to rewrite what they're saying. If you are quoting a source multiple times, the first time you quote that person, make sure you introduce who they are. After that, you can simply include the quote and then follow up with the parentheses with the author's last name and the page number. Make sure you do call your authors by last name if you refer to them again, and it's always in the present tense, right? So make sure you're aware of that. All right, let me just show you here some library stuff. So when you are ready to start researching this, you need to go to the chaffee.edu page, and on the home page here you'll see a link to the library. So if you just click on that, it'll probably ask you for your username and password, which is fine. It's usually like your first and last initial and then your student ID number and then your password. So follow those directions there. But once you get here, you'll want to go to this data articles and database list. There are 3 main ones that I like to use for research: Academic Search Complete, CQ Researcher, and then all the way down here, Opposing Viewpoints. So once you have your topic, these are great places to start. I know right here with Opposing Viewpoints, if you have no idea where to start, sometimes Opposing Viewpoints can offer some sort of hot button issues. So you'll see here consumer boycotts, digital currency, right? Disability rights, that's a really good one. Refugees in the United States, and you could certainly click on these links and they will take you to different articles and topics. So I'm going to come back up here to Academic Search Complete just to show you what this looks like and how to search around on that. So if I were just to type in refugees, I can click down here on refugees in the United States, and I'm going to click subject terms. I'm going to pretend that maybe that's my topic. I'm going to make an argument for welcoming and housing and accepting refugees into the United States. So I'm going to hit search. Notice right away that I come back with 1,500 articles here. So, and that's a lot to kind of get through. You'll notice over here that there's some dates, so I could certainly narrow down the dates a lot just to see sort of what comes in and how that changes. And again, if I'm trying to look for the last 5 years, I'd want to make sure I narrow those dates down. If I had a secondary topic here, if I already kind of thought about my argument and maybe what my supporting reasons are, I might actually look up something like human rights. Notice here it's a searchable term, and I might hit search just to see what comes up, and it certainly does narrow it down to 28 articles here, which is a lot more helpful in just terms of narrowing that down. So sometimes with these databases, I will caution you, you do need to have sort of a brainstorm of different searchable terms. When you do start to pull up stuff that's related, notice the stuff down here in capitals and in bold. You might be able to use some of these as part of your sort of brain search keyword things. So if I just look at these and maybe start clicking on a couple of these, this is what it looks like when I open these things up. A couple of really important points you want to pay attention to when you open up one of these articles. Whether or not this is a academic source. If I go back, quickly here, you can see that right here it says it's an academic journal. What that means by that is that oftentimes it's much more credible than something like a periodical, right, which can be a newspaper or magazine, right? An academic journal is usually going to be peer-reviewed, which means that it's written by an expert or many experts, and then it's also been reviewed by other experts in the field who have passed off on this kind of research. So pay attention to that. The other thing you want to pay attention for is when it was published, where it was published, right? You'll want to even notice here how many pages it is. I often caution students if it seems like an overwhelming amount of pages. Let's say this actually said 81 pages. You probably don't have time to read an article that big and include that research as a part of your larger project. So just pay attention to that initially. The other thing that you'll want to do is pay attention to this abstract. An abstract is simply a summary of the article itself. So this does not tell you everything that's in that article. You are still responsible for opening up the full text version of this article and reading the entire thing. Now I have a couple suggestions when it comes to reading these things. I am kind of old school. I like to print up my research if I feel like this is something that I'm going to be able to use. So if I read this abstract, right, and I felt like it was something that was going to be able to support my argument, I personally would print it up and I would read it with a pen in my hand, and I would write questions on there, and I would annotate furiously. I would rewrite little summaries in the margins. That's just how I tend to tackle things. And I'm just kind of scrolling through here just to see what it actually looks like to read these things. They can be very dense depending on the academic journal. So notice here we get a table on the right side of the screen, and this might be easy to read or it might be difficult, just kind of depending on how they are breaking down the analysis of their findings and their research. And so be careful of that. You are 100% responsible if you quote. Even if I only quoted, let's say, one sentence in this whole thing or two sentences, right? I have the expectation as your instructor that you have read this entire article. So please, please, please be sure that you have read this. If you read this abstract and you decide, you know what, I don't know what they're talking about, this seems too dense, you do not have to use it, right? So I certainly encourage you to make sure that you are using this to the best of your ability, right? If you do like it, I want you to notice that on the right side of your screen, you do have this little toolbar. You can use the citation tool here to help you. If you scroll down, we're looking for MLA. You can highlight this. You can copy and then paste it into your works cited page if you know you want to use that, right? If you decide not to use it, certainly I wouldn't do that. Again, you still are responsible for making sure your formatting is correct and that all the information there is correct. So please just be aware of that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say on this. Let's see. So let's say I did want to use an article like this, and I opened it up, I read that abstract. It sounds like something that's going to help me in my particular text, in my essay, and I open this up and I read this furiously. I write all over it. I come up with some ideas. I highlight a few key places where I might actually go ahead and pull out some direct quotes. Um, One thing that I would do before you stop reading this particular article or whatever article you choose is to write a brief summary. And oftentimes, y'all, I just do it like right on this front page. And all the summary is it's a very short, in your own words, what is this article saying? So, just 3 to 4 sentences. What are the main ideas that this article is after? And it might take you a minute or two because sometimes it's really hard to process these kind of works. They can be very dense, but again, just kind of go slow, and it can be a very simplified version of a summary, but it still is a summary. You're going to need to rely on that skill this week because you are going to be posting a summary of a piece of research for your writing assignment this week. So, for your research assignment this week. So that's something you are going to need to practice. Again, don't choose something that's so over your head that you feel like you can't adequately summarize it or talk about it. So if you are opening up these academic journals and they are just way over your head, right? Choose something else. I don't want you to feel like you are reading something that is just so beyond you. However, I do want to say that these things are challenging and they are good for you to read. A lot of you, again, are going into that medical field. You're going to be asked to read clinical assessments. You should know medical law. And so even though the language can be very dense, go slow. Sometimes when these things are really big articles, I'll break it up. I'll tell myself, you know what, I'm going to read a paragraph and then I'm going to go, get a glass of water or, chips and salsa or whatever. Like I just reward myself and just take it really slow. If these things are over, 3 pages, right? It's going to take me for sure more than an hour to read it if it's an academic journal. So for me, I'm not a fast reader. They take a lot of time to kind of break down. Sometimes too, I can't necessarily summarize everything immediately after I've read it. I might have to sit, go for a walk with the dogs or something, and come back to it at a later time. So try to be patient with yourself, which is really hard because I know a lot of you students are trying to finish your work, and I mean your work for this class last minute. And that is something that good researchers know you really can't do. You cannot thoroughly research a topic and find everything that you need to say about that topic in a short amount of time. So you essentially have 3 weeks to write the from first draft to final draft of this essay, and in that 3 weeks you should be researching just a little bit every day. You shouldn't be waiting until the last minute to find your pieces of research. Okay, I'm going to sign off here. I'll have some stuff coming up this week, maybe something else in the Q&A forum in terms of like how to research, right? There is an extra credit opportunity on the Moodle page too, if you haven't already seen that. If you go down to week 3, right here it says Ask a Librarian. It's an optional assignment, but I'm offering 5 points of extra credit. So I know a few of you have missed a couple points on your quiz, right? So if you would like the opportunity for that, go ahead and click on that link and make sure you follow the directions there, as with every other place. So if you have questions, please email me. I will see you soon. Bye.